All right. Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Welcome to the kickoff event for the Black Lives Matter at School Week. We're going to be talking about the progress of this movement, how we got to where we are, and how we are currently, it feels like we're transitioning from being educator and adult-led to being student-led. So that's the focus of tonight's conversation, but also a preview of what's coming in the week. And a little bit of history of where we've been and how we got to this place. So we're going to start with introductions of our groups. Some folks aren't here yet, and when they get here, they can introduce themselves. So I am Tracy Castro Gill. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Washington Ethnic Studies Now. And I'm going to kick it to Alexis, who's our youth advisory board representative for WASN, which is short for Washington Ethnic Studies Now. So Alexis, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Alexis Burrow. I use she, her pronouns. I am a junior at Foster High School in Sequilla, and I'm a member of the I'm a member of the NAACP Youth Council, but also representing mainly right now Washington Ethnic Studies Now in their Youth Advisory Board.
Thank you. And then I'm going to pass it to Fernell, and then Fernell, if you can help introduce your youth representatives.
Thank you. Beautiful. Hi, everyone. Welcome. And I'm so excited to be here. My name is Fernell Miller. I'm the CEO and founder of The Root of Us, and I'm the parent company of The Root of Our Youth, which is a youth advocacy agency, does research around, oh boy, so many things, just racial and social and educational justice, as well as advocating for Black and Brown youth around the state. And I have a few representatives here today. I see Laurel and Jasmine. Would you introduce yourselves, please?
Hi. Oh, can everyone hear me? Okay. Hi, I'm Laurel. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a mentor and I'm a post-college student, so a little bit out of the youth category. Yeah. Now, pass to Jazzy.
Where'd she go? Where'd she go? Don't hide from me, Jazzy. There you are. Just say who you are and your name, what you like to do. Can you hear me? She's in middle school. You know where some of that comes. We got you.
Hi, my name is Abdi Gir. I am an IA bilingual bilingual instructional assistant at Aki Middle School. So I'm happy to participate this program. And have a nice night to everybody. Everybody, I appreciate your presentation and everything.
Thank you, Abdi. I'm glad that you're here. I am having a little shyness with Jazzy. We'll come back around. She needs a little warm up, but I'm happy to do a ground in for us a little bit to give us a way to be present with each other. Before we start, or do I see one more youth? Alexis. Oh no, she already did. Alexis.
John just logged in, so.
Okay, go ahead, John. I'll pass to John then. Hi, John. Is he getting there? There he is.
Hey everybody. I'm so sorry I'm late. What was the introduction prompt? Your name probably and pronoun? Johnny Greenberg.
Your group. And your group, and pass it to one of your members. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm one of the youth coordinators for the NAACP Youth Council, and I see a few of us here tonight. Alexis being one of them, Kaylee, I see Winston. And so if they've not yet gone, I'd pass it to them.
Hi, I'm Kaylee. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am here representing the NAACP Youth Council.
Hi, Kaylee. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too for now.
I miss you guys.
And then you said Winston also. Winston?
Oh, I go by he, him pronouns, and I represent NAACP too.
Sweet. So what we had planned was to go into small breakout rooms and get to know people who are coming and use the concept of Ubuntu, which is an African concept, which translates, roughly to I am because we are. And so the prompt that we're going to ask you to use to introduce yourselves in small groups is who you're bringing in the room with you, because we can't be who we are as individuals without the community around us supporting us, without our ancestors, without our legacies, right? Because we do this for our legacies too. So who are you bringing in the space, along with name and pronouns? So name, pronouns, organization if you're affiliated with one, and then who you bring to the space. I'm typing it in the chat. So we're just gonna do like a 5-minute breakout and get to know some of the individuals in the room. And I'm just gonna open it up to random breakouts. So here we go.
Well, thank you, Tracy.
Back, everybody. I forgot to ask, are there any youth present from the Washington Association of Washington Student Leaders? No, James said he might not make it, but do we have any youth representatives from?
I want you. I
Nope.
Is that what? Go ahead. If you are, please introduce yourselves and your group if you are here from Washington Student Leaders Association. And then I also see Michelle Mukasa from the Root of Us also joined us, so she can introduce herself too. ER, go ahead. Who's that, ER? I thought we were going to unmute, sorry.
I can
Go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle from the Root of Our Youth. I am a spoken word poet, a activist, just all around, I don't know. I'm here to find healing, to share stories, and just come as a kind of like a come together in community. Miss Miller's been my mentor for years, and just an amazing opportunity to talk with people and find healing in these spaces. So, yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. So glad you're here.
Okay, so we're going to get started off by talking a little bit about the history of Black Lives Matter at school and how we've progressed since then. And anybody, please feel free to jump in to add anything. But I want to say, really, this goes back to, we can trace it back to one person, Deshaun Jackson, an educator, community support staff at Lashai Elementary School. No, Thurgood Marshall, right? John, help me out. Thurgood Marshall. Was it Lashai?
John Muir.
I can't remember.
John Muir Elementary.
John Muir, thank you. It was neither one. Glad somebody remembers. I feel like I've told this story a million times too. But he was inviting Black parents to the school to do the high fives. You know, when the kids come to school and they do the high fives. And the art teacher, Julie Trout, created a t-shirt that said Black Lives Matter, John Muir Elementary School. And people showed up, people showed up online, I should say, threatening the event, calling in bomb threats to the school. And so the school district canceled the event, but Deshaun and the other educators there said, you know what, we're not going to listen to these terrorists, and we're going to do it anyways because we know what's good for our students. And they went ahead with the day anyways. And a group called Social Equity Educators that was part of the Seattle Education Association including Jesse Hagopian, started organizing around this. And Darren Hoop was part of that. John was part of that. A bunch of people were part of that. And we all wore t-shirts to school that same day that said Black Lives Matter. And we taught our kids lessons about Black Lives Matter movement and why it was important. And the whole theory behind it was that they can't bomb all of us, right? And so if everybody was doing it, we're showing solidarity as well. So that evolved, and the next year, educators across the country started picking up on it, and there became this national network. The educators in Philly have done a lot of work around this. And so I'm going to show a video that kind of tells that story as well. Let me, oops, share my screen again. While I'm pulling that up, does anybody have anything to add to that? I tried to make it big. Okay, so this was a video that Jesse Hagopian had made. It was the second year of the Black Lives Matter at School week. So we had already been creating lesson plans and building networks across the country. And this was created just before that second year that we did Black Lives Matter at School.
What is happening in our schools today is heartbreaking.
This is one of the racist rants discovered Monday at Oak Park River Forest High School.
Our kids are being called the N-word. We have white students who think it's okay to come to school for Halloween with a KKK mask.
1.6 million children in this country go to a school where there's a police officer but no counselor.
Educators in Washington State are 90% white.
I'm not getting the education that I need as a Black male.
The people who have done the conquering have been the ones that we've been lauding in school.
Kobe, who's in the 9th grade at Pearland High School, was studying immigration when he read this in his textbook, a comment that referenced African slaves as workers.
All I ever see is us being slaves, Like, why don't you ever teach me, how we fought back? Because I know my people are strong.
A referee at a high school wrestling match in New Jersey told a wrestler he had to cut his dreadlocks or forfeit the match.
I see people around me who are hurt, and it is wrong to not speak up.
Black Lives Matter at School is a declaration that Black students deserve to be taught the truth and that their lives have value.
It gives students, not only of color, but of other races and ethnicities, a chance to see different cultures.
We have lessons for every single day, Monday through Friday. So there's about 2 to 3 principals per day that are connected.
We participated in this last year, and a lot of feedback we got from educators who have never really experienced ethnic studies in the classroom was that their students were more engaged in this content than they had ever seen before.
I learned so much through that really empowered me as a Black man. This was probably the first time I really was excited about school. It's something that I'm passionate about now.
So as you can see from that video, there were a lot of adults talking. Oops, sorry.
Buy a little known cryptocurrency.
There were a lot of adults there, a lot of adults leading the work. And like I said, it started off with adult educators, and then it moved into the Education Association. And then with our ethnic studies curriculum development, we were able to write some of the curriculum that educators use across the country for that week. But as we've kind of built this movement, the adults have started taking a backseat to this work, a support role. And students are starting to take the lead, which is really, that was the intent behind it from the beginning, right? So it's beautiful to see this transformation of youth leadership. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And so I want to bring the students forward. And as I was looking at, Alexis and one of the other youth advisory boards from Washington Ethnic Studies now collected videos, and I'll be playing some of them in a moment. but I was listening to what they were saying and previewing them and queuing them up for tonight. And I think it would be interesting to be able to compare the responses in our panel questions between the adults and the youth, and see what, what they think some of the barriers and successes are. I don't know if they'll be the same. So that'll be interesting, I think. So I want to call forward the youth from Washington Ethnic Studies Now, the NAACP Youth Council, the Root of Our Youth, and if anybody has logged on from Association of Washington Student Leaders, these are the folks who we're going to be listening to right now. And we have a series of questions that we want to ask them. So can I get a thumbs up from all the youth to let me know if you're ready? Yeah. All right, here we go. So any of the youth, feel free to answer the question. Feel free to not answer the question. It's totally up to you. The first question is, and I'll put it in the chats too so people can follow along. Where are young people learning about how to understand legislation that affects them? There's a lot happening at the state level in regard to ethnic studies, in regard to racial equity. We just saw a bill try to be pushed through that would ban teaching critical race theory, How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, the 1619 Project, all of those things that we look to as anti-racist advocates. So where are you learning about that? How are you getting that information? I'll open it up to the youth.
Okay, I'll go first. Where I have learned about like legislation and government systems would definitely be in my social studies classes. I would say specifically in 8th grade is when I did like the most work regarding that topic and like just learning about government. However, I don't know, maybe like a question that we're gonna get to is gonna get to this, but I feel like maybe not. But we only learned about or I have only learned about, the general idea. Like what are the 3 branches? What powers do the 3 branches have? Or like how does, and I don't even know if we really learned that much about like how legislation, like bills are actually passed. We would kind of like touch on it, but it's more, broader terms, broader picture. But in response to like we were talking about like anti-CRT bills and like trying to ban certain like parts of history from being taught or certain books from being shared, we don't learn about that part. Like we don't, like I feel like it would be way more effective to like learn about the general processes, but then talk about like specific bills and specific stuff that's happening in our state government or federal government and like relate it to our lives, not just like have to memorize some facts and then like go on with your life.
As I'm going through like the speaking order, since I'm next, I like 100% agree with like Alexis, and just adding on is like I noticed how we learn a lot more about the processes and things, but we don't learn about what actions we can take in schools. Like I feel like the way I've learned about like actions we can take on like testifying and things like that with legislation, like with like the new bill going on, I've learned it through like just like community and like my youth group and like listening to others rather than like school itself. And I feel like that's where we need to learn about we need to learn more about how can we take action on things that are impacting us and impacting our lives.
In the speaking order, Winston is next, but I could go if not. I'm gonna go ahead and speak on that. So the question was, where are youth learning about how to understand legislation that affects them? Honestly, I feel like youth are not learning about legislation, but in the spaces that have provided opportunity, like such as like the Root of Our Youth, we've been able to share like a Google document that has in like simple terms what legislation is. And like from my personal experience, I learned about legislations through attending like school board meetings, understanding, like going on the website and reading it for myself in layman's terms. But often the reason why I go to those student board meetings is because there's an offense on a student or something that I've gone through. So it's in protest and it's in activism to advocate for myself or to advocate for another student. And so like you kind of have no other choice to see like what are the rules and what is not being applied and why. So I don't really feel like there is a lot of spaces to learn. I think that the youth, when we were talking, we said online, kind of Twitter, social media, word of mouth is what's happening, and it's on a minimal scale. But yeah, I'm going to pass it on to Nakia. Please correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
We can pass. If you're next in the speaking order and you don't want to speak, that is 100% fine. Winston, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, my bad. But on in my personal experience, when way I learned about like legislation and stuff was when I used to live in Florida. I went to a charter school, like middle school in Florida. I learned like a little bit in that, but other than that, like through high school and stuff, like it wasn't like I wasn't really that much like educated on it. So I would say like I didn't really like I wasn't really like learning about it that much as far as that. But as it was stated before, like social media and stuff, I have like seen like things like on Twitter and stuff as far as like so through that. So I would say like it's like minimal, like it's kind of like we don't really learn about it that much in my personal.
Cool. I'll go ahead and answer now, since Nakia said that they would type their response. Yeah, other than the Schoolhouse Rock song in 6th grade, that's kind of the last I remember hearing about like how things get passed. And then it's really just word of mouth. Like I have friends who are really invested, but it was mostly at the local level. So like the mayor and the council members who could speak to directly, they knew the people that were in the meeting. So they would come to us and talk about what's going on. And then we could offer direct input and they would go back and like, okay, well, I'll talk to this person. So that's kind of where I learned. And then there's bigger things that are social media related, but that also feels very distant. So I think the most learning I've done is local, just because it feels like it has a greater direct impact on me because it's like within a certain mile radius of me. So I'm more likely to like look into that, or I'll read like the little booklet that comes with the ballots. But that's pretty much the only place I can think of learning any of this information. And I'll pass, I guess, back to Tracy since we're done.
Thank you. Alexis wanted to add something. Go ahead, Alexis.
Yeah, I went to add, I don't know what it was that you said that reminded me of this, but like to add something positive to this question, definitely like I would say I'm more connected with like the local scene as well, just because like my city council members are involved in like community engagements and stuff that I'm in and that type of thing. And I know that like at my school, even though I haven't had classes, like there have been opportunities where like state legislators have come in to talk about, I don't know what, I didn't take the class, but what I was gonna say is that like in Tukwila, not in Tukwila, in like South King County specifically, there's been this group, I guess, or like organization put together. It's called Build the Bench Washington, and it's from our King County, what is it? King County Council member? Yeah, Germay Zalahe, I think is how you say his name, but like he has put together like this kind of forum gathering where like different, local public officers like city council, and then they like teach you how to run, and they teach you how to or teach youth how to make political aspirations a reality. And so I think that's really cool and like something that needs to be spread more.
Thank you. And then Nikai in the chat said, I can't at this moment remember a time where I learned to understand legislation in schools. I've always learned about this stuff in workshops that I sought out on my own and within my community organizations I am part of. So I ask this question hopefully for obvious reasons. It's not easy for youth to enter into these spaces because they're just not learning about it in school, right? They're not provided opportunities to understand where they can use their agency and push the system in the directions that they want it to go. And so before we move on, I want to remember that we're here to talk about Black Lives Matter at School Week. So one of the questions we asked—
Tracy, before you move on, I'm going to give a plug for Michelle Williams Clark oh, hi there. Alex is coming up. Should I stop?
Go ahead, Michelle Williams Clark.
She's been at the Boys and Girls Club for decades, teaching the youth and government courses. And to take civics courses in the high schools, they're electives. They're, like you said, very difficult to find and be in. And so she's one of the places I wish she was here tonight. And for those who want to learn more, be involved, learn how to run, go actually to the legislature's offices, she would love to have you in her group. So I will pass that on to Tracy so you can have that in the resources for later and join that group. It's very large and very active. So thank you.
Will you put it in the chat so the other people listening can also have access to that? Okay, so this is Alex, and he's talking about why Black Lives Matter at school is important to him.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I think that Black Lives Matter at school is very important for us to learn about because it gives us a chance to learn about the raw history of this country and also what Black people have gone through and overcame. I think it also gives us an opportunity for us to widen our perspectives and individual lenses to learn about more topics or learn about, take into consideration some things that we might have not thought about. For example, the critical race theory, intersectionality as well, and learning about how different social justice movements kind of intersect with each other and have things in common, and even learning about one's personal biases and what they can do to overcome it is very important to learn about, especially considering the education system that we're currently in is taught through a very white and heteronormative lens. So growing up, we tend to subconsciously maybe even see things through this lens, whether we want to or not. And I think that it's important for Black Lives Matter at schools to be weaved into the curriculum so that we can combat this and also learn about different experiences and also learn from each other.
All right, thank you, Alexis, for collecting student testimony on, students can't all be here at the same time, so we figured the best way to center student voice was to ask for recordings. So I'm going to ask the second question. So since y'all mentioned some, the Root of Our Youth and other organizations where you can go to and learn about legislation and policy and how to impact them, but who's in the youth spaces? What you're telling me is that you have to go out and search for it on your own, but are there people or organizations in youth spaces supporting leadership and youth advocacy? I'll type it in the chat.
I think I'm going first. Who is in youth spaces? Well, I feel like for me, the way that I got involved in WASN or NYC, ABSL is, well, it's from specifically one person. Her name's Sarah. And she, when I was in middle school, I never had her class, but she always would be in race and equity, which is something I was interested in. And then I don't know, ask her, maybe she saw something. She's like, I should, keep giving me back girl opportunities. And that's kind of what happened where like, I would just speak in assemblies and like, we just like had a good vibe connection. And then she, it wasn't just me, like she would send emails and give opportunities to people to like do things. But when I say that, like that is how I got involved, and like now I can, be more proactive and I know more about myself and like how I advocate and all that type of stuff. But like it's, I think, not as prevalent to have like, supportive teachers or mentors. Like every student deserves to have at least one person in their, building that they feel comfortable with or safe with or can learn from. But I feel like not everyone has that. And so like in the classroom is, I feel like, where all of this kind of like work and developing, youth leaders has to happen. But a lot of times in the classroom, like not every teacher is a Miss Herda, not every teacher is a Tracy, not every teacher is someone who cares about, real life or outside life. And also not every classroom is like a space for that, because, we get a lot of places where it's just about learning, but like not learning the right stuff, or just about grades, or just about tests. And so in my head, like whenever I have to like go out and, hopefully find other youth to do stuff, I like have my go-to people, but I wish that I could like have a wider range of people to go to. But I feel like that also shouldn't be like on me. It should be on my school to make sure that like there's community building like opportunities, and just like bringing like people into the classrooms, bringing opportunities into the classrooms, whether it's through like actual guests or whether it's through just like promoting. Like I feel like that's the easiest way to get to a larger audience, is through the classrooms, because that's where the kids are. And I don't feel like we have enough of that in the classrooms. It's like 1 in a million type of thing.
Yeah, and just adding on, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting this question right, but from like my perspective with like the workshops that I've like led, and things I've noticed, that we do have support from educators, but I feel like we need more educators, and we need more people who are involved with like making decisions for schools and etc. Like superintendents, school boards, etc. They need to support like youth leadership more. And I've noticed that the people that other than other youth that are supporting youth leadership are community members and parents. I feel like I've seen, those are like the people that I've seen a lot throughout like workshops and things like that, coming in and supporting, etc. But there are also still educators that are supporting us, but I feel like there should be more.
I think so the question is, who is in youth spaces supporting their leadership and advocacy? From my experience, I believe like the youth are there, like the leadership in like young students and like young people, like the heart and the fire and the desire is there in the schools, and there's a lot of like students who are ready to speak and are ready to tell their story, but the advocacy is very few and far between. Like from my experience, like Miss Miller was my substitute teacher, and she was there, and she wasn't even my full-time teacher. I didn't even start connecting until post-graduation, and I could name maybe 2 teachers that were advocating for me, but they were full-time teachers, and that wasn't happening. And so even when I was younger, my friend had a great idea to teach Black Lives Matter in February to our different students. And so we did that to the teachers like that would allow us. We taught the students. Obviously, we're not qualified, but we did our research and we did that. And so it's just like the voice of us like was there, and we had the desire, but there was nobody to advocate except the teachers that we knew. We could have spoke louder, but there was no advocacy. And so I think that the support is like few. Like there's few tokens, but we need those people in high positions of power to empower the youth, to create these spaces, to open up and invite people who are qualified, people who do that for a profession, because it's out there. You know, I think that there's like a disconnect though.
I want to elevate what's in the chat. Alexis and I both said you are qualified. Lived experience is qualification, and you bring that to your space. You bring cultural and community wealth to your spaces. So don't ever minimize that. And then I also want to share what Nakai put in the chat. I was fortunate enough to have a godmother that is part of the Oregon State Legislature, and she gave me privy to many of the open and private meetings while still in my teens and early 20s. Unfortunately, I did not appreciate my learnings until my late 30s. Oh no, that was from McKinley. Sorry. But anyways, it was in the chat. And the chat doesn't go in the recording, so I want to make sure I say it out loud. Any other youth want to respond to this question? The answer is no, that's fine too. So I want to, you can have think time, and if you think of something you want to add, I'm going to play the second video from Jonathan about why Black Lives Matter is important to him.
All right, so it's late, but I just wanted to give my couple takes on why I think that Black Lives Matter is important. Number one, you know, of course, it holds more cops accountable, and you know, with 2020, with George Floyd's killer going to jail and actually seeing justice, you know, we can have more chances like that. And with Ahmaud Arbery's killers, we could see more things like that, you know, where justice is, where we actually get justice, and it's not just and it's not just swept under the rug, or you know, they go free. We can actually see justice get taken place. It helps the community, it benefits it. You know, we can see that, you know, whether murals or seeing leaders, it really helps it helps better the community. And you know, stopping police brutality is just one thing that we could do. It's just step one. And I feel like with Black Lives Matter, you could go more and more to the top. You could, you know, we could work on more issues that affect the Black community, whether it's homelessness, whether it's poverty, whether it's teens at risk. We could do more thanks to Black Lives Matter and the funding with it. So that's why Black Lives Matter it's a good thing for the community.
Okay, again, thanks to Alexis for collecting that. There's a couple more questions, but we're running short on time, and I want to have opportunities for Q&A. So I'm going to ask you this last question. I think it's probably the most important question as we are in that transition from adult leadership to youth leadership. What's the difference between youth voice and youth leadership? What's the difference? I'm going to put it in the chat.
This is a good question. I would say that when it comes to like authentic youth leadership, it has to obviously like come from the youth and be curated by the youth. And like youth leadership is about, like, from the adult perspective, like if you would want to have youth leadership, it's about making sure that you're like seeking out the honest opinions and desires of youth and like letting them drive what they want to drive, but also like recognizing that leadership doesn't look the same for everyone. And so being able to like adapt to like whether it's your different classes or different students or whatever, and knowing and asking rather what they need, because some youth would like to teach a class about Black Lives Matter, like Michelle had talked about, which is super cool. And other students just need like support in writing like a public comment to a school board meeting or whatever. Like it's about, you know, curating or adapting to the different types of student leadership. And like then youth voice, it's about, you know, hearing what your youth have to say and like taking their opinions and messages into consideration, but like into consideration of adult leadership a little bit. So it's like listening to those public comments. And so like you got the youth voice, but then the leadership is like, what do you do with it? Like, how do you continue that momentum of like having youth presence and passion in your vicinity?
Alexis had said it like completely from my mind and like said it beautifully. And like just adding on, for me, I see that youth voice is this component to youth leadership. And that's like the way I see the difference is like you have to have youth voice in order to be like a part of this youth leadership, to be like a youth leader or youth leadership. And then I also see like youth leadership as like all the different types of like leadership styles or actions that youth are able to take, and youth voice is like one component of that.
Yeah, I like what everybody has said. I think youth voice is like the authenticity of like reason, and it's being able to create a space where young people can be able to have dialogue and have free space to just speak, you know? And then youth leadership, I believe, is the action behind it. It's organized, it's being able to implement the voice, the reason, the principles, and being able to execute it in a way that was intended. So that incorporates actually listening and then being able to bring that to life, you know, and it's critical to understand the why of the voices of these young people are saying, the how, you know, the steps. And sometimes that gets kind of diluted because a lot of leaders who are leading the youth might be like adults, you know, and so they might have different reasons, but like I think that both go so hand in hand. And it's really intentional and meaningful when it works together, you know.
I'll go ahead. I think the difference between youth voice and youth leadership, everyone said it so beautifully already. The only thing I was thinking of is that youth voice, kind of like how Michelle was saying, a little, if there's like a ton of adults in a room, there can be youth voice, but it will ultimately be somewhat corrupted if there's not youth in charge or deciding what actions to take and when to take them, and getting the opinions from other youth. Because I could talk to someone in middle school and we could have the same list of things that need to be done, but maybe my approach as someone who's just not there would be completely different, and the order, their priorities might not align with mine. And so it'd be important to have them as leaders, because they know how to navigate spaces better, because they're, like it was said earlier in the chat, like lived experience qualifies you. So like the youth are living it, and their experience is what needs to be pushing things forward. So I do think with youth leadership as well, adults, it's like we're there to provide the things that youth can't easily get, like filling out paperwork maybe that you have to be over 18 to fill out, or collecting funds or transportation type things. And we're kind of like vehicles for their success.
whether youth want to respond to that question. I want to open it up for Q&A. So if you have questions for the youth about this topic, you can either unmute yourself and ask it, or put it in the chat and I'll ask it. So any questions for the youth?
Oops, Tracy, I want to point out that Tariq Scott is here, and he can speak on the League of Education Voters, the LILAC group, and where students can learn more about civic education. And also, Tariq, would you, there he is, hello. And then he can give more youth information.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I was in a bill hearing that just ended, so I'm here now. But oh, and sorry, what did you want me to talk about? Sorry, my brain is like frozen.
Well, we're wondering where the youth can learn about civic education and legislation. It's really not available. So we want to hear about your organization and how you make that accessible, and share about that.
Oh yeah, yes. I work for League of Education Voters. We're a statewide org. We work with students, parents, and educators to advocate for a high quality, equitable education. Some of our priorities are high quality early education, safe, supportive learning environments for K-12 students. Student mental health is a real big thing for us as well, especially with the whole pandemic. A lot of the student groups I've outreach, they sit at the mental health aspect, and then just not you guys kind of talked about before, not having like control. They don't feel like they have control of going back to school. And so what we're actually doing, I've been tasked to create our youth advisory committee, and what our big thing is making sure that like youth have a voice at the table in the Olympia process, and make it symbolic. Some of the things that we're working on is like doing things like having like students like have lobby days to meet the legislators. I'm a lobbyist as well with League of Education Voters, so they want to sit in on some of the lobby meetings we have to kind of to see how we build relationships with the legislators and their staff. Also sit in on like our policy meetings. We have we meet with different policy organizations and meet with them, so like actually be a part of like the decision-making tables, and not just have it like be like a one-time like thing per se. This session, because that's our long-term project, but this session is a short legislative session, but we've had there's actually a student mental health bill that's being heard this week on student absences for mental health days, and then also funding for more like mental health professionals in the school system to better like work and equip during this like social emotional learning and mental health kind of like emergency per se that we're going through. But what I would love, and we actually had someone from Rooter for Youth last week. They testified on a bill, it was an anti-critical race theory bill, and the student from Root of Our Youth, white student, but she was awesome because she spoke about how not being against anti-CRT, don't want to hear about the I guess atrocities and like the racism that BIPOC communities have faced in the past, and that's a privilege that white people they don't. If you don't want to hear it, that's a great privilege that you have, and to not be able to sometimes not being comfortable is also a privilege as well, but you have to be comfortable to really grow and advance, like learn, the history, just not African Americans, but other BIPOC communities, communities as well. I'm getting over a flu, but yeah, I've been attending a lot of the Root of Our Youth. Erin Jones, she's awesome. She has a group of students that they meet on Mondays and Fridays as well. And yeah, our big thing is just that I'm 35 years old, so I'm not the expert at being students right now. I mean, I can tell about when I was a student, but that doesn't matter. It really matter about getting those student-centered voices, and being like I would say like an adult ally per se, and like listening to them. You know, sometimes the message may be unfiltered, but that's what we need to hear. But we're really, and I'll wrap this up too, but we're really big right now and just like making sure that students are like a part of like the decision-making process, whether that's like testifying, whether that's like if you don't feel comfortable testifying in person, you always sign in on a bill you feel it's important to you, and you vote yay or nay. And just really sitting at these decision-making tables. And sometimes it doesn't have to be legislative, it could be grassroots as well. So that's what we're working on with the League of Education Voters. But overall, this session, a lot of it is me. It's just listening and meeting with different legislators to talk about special education, language access is another big thing we're focusing on, and then number one is student mental health.
Thank you, Tariq. Will you put your email in the chat right there? I just put in your the youth council with your name so people can find how to contact you, or you can always find him at our meetings at Root of Our Youth too.
I don't see any questions. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. But I want to show another video, a student collected video about this topic, and then we'll move to the mentor panel. So let's watch this video from, oh my gosh, Kaleo. And I'm probably saying it wrong, so I apologize in advance. Let me share my screen.
So mainly, I would say for me in high school, it was teachers that are mainly just a teacher, not a couple. I had a like a student counselor who really felt like she would connect to like the students and really take in and hear what we had to say. And I don't know, that was really helpful, And I also had a math teacher who was very helpful for that. He felt like he would provide like a platform for us students to really advocate about like how we were feeling about the class, what part of the curriculum were we a little strange with, because he was in active like development in the math department to kind of change the way education was taught and like introduce a new framework. So he was very helpful for that. The teachers and administration are the barriers for us students, because there is a form of like a power dynamic that seems to be going on, where our feelings or like the way we're talking about are like invalid and don't hold any weight just because we're young. We don't have enough life experiences. Those are the common answers to that. And it becomes very performative, like student council, ASB, stuff like that, where the administration makes students or allows students to feel like they are gaining the agency to do something on behalf of like the entire students, when in actuality it's just the administration that are pulling the strings. So definitely those are the major barriers, I would say. Well, the main thing is that students, especially like me right now, is they're kind of tired of being treated in the way they've been treated and want to introduce a new framework of education, So I would say when you get to that point, you start reaching out and you start looking at other organizations that could provide the proper platform for you to actually make change. And that could be other students, and that could be teachers as well, like I mentioned.
Okay, and that brings us to our mentor platform. And Tariq, please feel free to join in on this, and as well as Sabrina. I see Sabrina here. Sabrina Burr. Do you want to introduce yourself, Sabrina, real quick, and then we'll get to the questions?
Sabrina Burr, sorry for being late. I was testifying tonight in the Senate on funding stabilization, so I think it's important. My name is Sabrina Burr. My most important role, and I'm about to embarrass her, is Rena Matasia's mother. I help found in NAACP Youth Council with John Greenberg and Rita Green. I work in Seattle Council PTSA, and I'm a troublemaker, and children are our most important resource and young adults, and I stand behind you and support your awesomeness and your brilliance.
Thank you. So we have Fernell, Tariq, Sabrina, and John. And I'm going to start, you know, we were going to answer the same questions, but I've kind of modified them based on what we've heard from the youth. And they told us that they don't have access to learning about these important topics in their classrooms. You know, Alexis said they get like a broad overview of the 3 levels of government and how a bill becomes a law, et cetera, et cetera. And then who was it that said the Schoolhouse Rocks? I have to laugh about that. The Schoolhouse Rocks cartoon is pretty much it.
That's no joke. That's real. That's how I learned.
Right. So my question is, what prevents educators from teaching youth about current legislation and policies that affect them? I'll type it in the chat. What prevents us from doing that?
I think the same rationale for what keeps the CRT bill coming up and alive, meaning if we know better, then we'll do better and differently. So it's our education is purposeful in keeping us segregated and really not, ignorant on issues, because that's easier for us to control. So we don't want really critical thinkers, because we will change the systems, and which is why youth always lead in that. And you saw what I put in the chat about SNCC, or I want to read that real quick. I don't want to get it wrong. I like to model after this. Did you see where I put it, Tracy? The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committees. That was in the 60s. And so that was quickly shut down. That's how youth are always at the lead, the forefront, the cutting edge with their critical thinking and pushing us forward. And so we don't teach that in school on purpose. It's hard to access, hard to maintain. And like Laurel said, Schoolhouse Rock, that's easy to access right in elementary. And why is that shut down? Why don't we see that? Even that series in cartoon anymore. I mean, we're laughing about it, but that's serious. So just some thoughts on that of why we don't teach our youth a lot of things on purpose.
I'm doing a big pause, making sure I'm not interrupting anybody. Okay. I think a lot of it is a lot of the educators don't know. I don't think they're, and I mean, it's a cycle perpetuates itself. Like it just keeps going, because I feel like I think a lot of government classes are generally just federal government classes. And so, you know, we have to dig back to my education. I certainly didn't learn anything about state government. And oftentimes when state government's included, it's included at like the middle school level, which is more like, hey, look where the marble came from. And, oh, let's pass some cute bill or something. And it's not necessarily these meaningful things. And if there's any middle school teachers, feel free to correct me. But that's the what I've gotten from my students, what I try to take them to Olympia. And I also just think that structurally, the whole system's designed for it not to happen in that, like, school is so compartmentalized with these arbitrary education categories, class categories. And so generally speaking, this would fall mostly in social studies, but social studies is also compartmentalized doubly. Like, so you got your world and US, but you have your own government class. But I just told you the problem with a lot of government classes, it's all federal. So I just feel like it's like everything. So you have to just basically be able to be willing to, you have to know how to work the system as one, my cat's saying hi. And you also have to be willing just to buck the curriculum that you're being told to taught. And so it feels like it just requires lots of little revolutions within this system that's designed not to have it be taught.
Yeah, and I see in the chat, Stephanie said scope and sequence of curriculum is brutal in a department that requires all teachers to teach the same thing. And in my professional development that I do with educators, I say, if you are here to accept that education is a racist institution, like if we're all on that same level, education is a racist institution, you cannot follow the rules and be an anti-racist. Like it just doesn't work, right? So like John said, you have to just throw out the curriculum and be willing to do that. Okay, I try to give long wait times too. I'm going to move on to the next one. As adult mentors and facilitators of youth groups, where are the barriers? What barriers are you running into in opening doors for your youth?
I think, John, you said it really well about the compartmentalizing, because when you open one door or pull one lever, it shuts another. And when youth who are closest to the harm and what the policies and practices, how they land on the youth, they're closest to it and see and feel the harm first and the most. And then when we say that we center education is about the youth, but don't partner with them, don't center them, don't listen and move forward with action, even if they've shared what to do. Those are just the games that dismantling all of that, where who we hold in esteem and how we see youth in general. And so if we can't see them and see their humanity, then that keeps them shut in that cage of just trying to, their voice in the wind. And I don't know how they even trust us adults to to do much, because the way that we adults in the education system have, a hand tied behind our back with tape over our mouth, just like you said, Tracy, that the system is designed for us not to do exactly what we're trying to do. And so youth who feel it the hardest, are closest to the harm, we always need to be in community and let them lead and center everything that is that they're closest to, that we can't see or have the harder time seeing, being further out in the system. So we need more adults like you and John and all to, we can't even work fast enough, crash this door down, kick that one in, lift this window up. There's just so many ways to try to maneuver this game. And it's just very frustrating, as you all know, because that's why we're here, to try to work together to dismantle it. So as long as we keep our youth centered and lock elbows with them and really listen to where they are and move in that direction, that's the only future I want, is where they're the lead of it. So
yeah, go ahead, Sabrina.
I just want to add to what Fernell said. Also, it's their intellectual capital and brilliance when it's not really honored, and that their ideas are not really honored as viable ideas to solutions that affect them. I think it does additional harm and distrust. And that's one of the barriers that I see over and over, that I really have to do extra advocating for on the front end, to make sure I let adults know, don't you disrespect these youth when they come in the door, because I've seen how much harm that does. And when they get to start talking to the youth and they really hear what they're saying, then they realize that those prejudgments are just dumb.
And Tariq, you put in the chat compensation. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think that's a huge part too.
Yeah, that's some of the things, just doing my outreach with different youth groups, is that compensation thing. That's something with when we're creating our youth advisory council. That's something we want to be different about, and that's something when reaching out to different funders, we thrown in there that having a compensation package. Ours, what we were looking at, just from the research I've been doing and outreach I've been doing, is something like around like 20, 25 an hour sounds appealing and appropriate for high school students. And with us, we would have them serving more like consultants, for our youth advisory council, but definitely the compensation pack. I mean, I think that's not just for youth, but just you look at school boards as well, and people ask why they aren't. I guess that's like culturally like diverse, and you have to like think about like the compensation, and then also just being like adaptable. A lot of like students, I've during my short time here, like sometimes the weekends are better to like outreach to them, or some like evenings are better to like outreach them. I've been on a few meetings with Fresnel Rooter for Youth on Saturdays, and if you really want to reach youth, you have to like really like meet them where they're at, because during the weekdays sometimes they have schoolwork, they may be in sports or other extracurricular activities around school. So just being adaptable, working with them like when like time permits, and then definitely that compensation package. You don't want to like take and not give. I mean, I think that's a really big thing, is a compensation.
Yeah, thank you. I want to show a video, and then I'm going to come back and ask one of the questions that I changed based on what we've been talking about. So I apologize to the people who read the questions before, because I'm changing them up on you. So these videos, the last one and this one, come from some youth from the University of Washington who are in ethnic studies programs there. And Odalis is one of our interns that we have from that program. She's interning with Washington Ethnic Studies now to complete her program and graduate. So this is Odalis.
I was in high school, no teacher had ever brought up Black Lives Matter. No one had ever brought up the BLM movement. And still today, now that I'm in college and graduating at the University of Washington, I ask my siblings who are still in high school today, and they say the same thing, that the BLM movement hasn't been spoken about in their schools. The only time that they ever get to hear about this is through social media or through public news. And to me, it seems almost counterintuitive to have come from where I am from in my small town, and to learn about BLM and to learn about ethnic studies, to learn about more social injustices going on, and then to come back to my community and to only see that my siblings are living through the same things I am. And how it makes me question, how can we as a community heal? How can we learn? How can we have this conocimiento of our history, our background, respect for others, when we're not learning about this in school? And so I feel that if there was a BLM Action Week in my school district, things would have been different. I would have been around a different community of people. I would have been around a more accepting space in my high school, and I would have been more knowledgeable of things that resembled a diverse background, diverse cultures, diverse histories that just never made it into my high school. And I was privileged enough to have the opportunity to go to the University of Washington and be in these spaces and learn about BLM and learn about ethnic studies. But it often makes me question, why can't people in my town, in my community, have access to these things? How can, as as a school district, how can we understand our students? How can students understand the world around them when they're not fully aware of the politics, the social injustices, and the histories and the complexities that come with living in the United States?
All right. Well, that at least provided a perfect segue into this next question. Let's talk about the anti-critical race theory movement. Recently, I and Washington Ethnic Studies Now and the NAACP Youth Council were topics of attack nationally that's gone internationally from a very ultra-conservative, I won't even call them a news outlet, ultra-conservative online publication. And one of the things they attacked for the NAACP was that compensation part that Tariq was talking about. They see that as, you know, we're just paying kids to be the voices of the adults, right? That there's no way that kids can have these kinds of thoughts or opinions, and we're just brainwashing them and then paying them to go out and say what we want them to say, right? But it's not just conservative folks. I've seen it from liberals here in Washington State. Melissa Westbrook's blog, I know we all kind of don't like her very much, but there's people on her blog saying that adding students to school boards is eroding our democracy. So that's like a straight quote from there. That we're somehow destroying democracy by putting young people in positions of power and centering their voices, right? And I see that as part of this anti-critical race theory movement. So just speak about the current political environment. How's it affecting youth leadership? What's coming up in your conversations and spaces in terms of youth leadership?
I'm going to invite some other educators that I see here into this conversation. Principal Dave Watson is here with us, and Jessica from doing her doctorate program at University of Washington. They may have some more voice to add to that. I just have always talked to people about we talk about race all the time in school. We just talk about one race all day, 24/7. So I wish we would talk about others and more, because yeah, we should, if we want to stop talking about race, and we should stop talking about the one that we always talk about. So I'll open that up to others or other educators in the room to also chime in on that.
Yeah, I definitely like to say something. I kind of stay quiet just out of respect for the panel. I had a couple of questions that I definitely want to ask. So at the school that I work at Canyon Park, which is in the North Shore School District in Bothell. What we're struggling with right now, I'm sorry, it's that language right now. I'm kind of relaxing, so if you guys don't mind. But so anyways, what I'm struggling with right now is we are, I'm new to the district, administrator of color, it's my second year. I want to say up until about 2 months ago, I was the only Black employee of the school that I worked at. And I happen to be an assistant principal. And so I really focused on bringing more cultural awareness to the school. Like, honestly, they knew what they were getting when they got me. They weren't ready for it, but they knew what they were getting. One thing that I'm struggling with as an administrator is creating those spaces to where, let's be honest, the kids, the students, I don't even want to call them students or kids, the young adults, they're ready to have the conversations. It's the adults that are not ready to have the conversations. And so as we open up space for that, I'm struggling with helping adults understand that it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're in education, you're a lifelong learner, and you can sit down and learn a lot if I'm learning a lot about LGBTQ IA plus, and I know I probably didn't get all the acronyms right. If I'm learning about that group of individuals, that family, from an 11-year-old young lady, then, and I'm 47, I'm not too old to learn anything, you know? So one thing that I struggle with right now when it comes to race, we open it up to where we allow the conversation. If you come to the school, there's all types of signage up about how we love everybody and how we want everyone to belong. But what I realize is that we also have you know, there's like a code. There's like, you know, this is what we do and this is what we don't do. So as we try to open up space for not just these young adults, but these older adults to be able to voice their opinions or ask these questions so that they understand the true meaning of critical race theory and not this acronym that this other group decided to call it and place their own definition on it, but the true meaning of it. We started a student racial and educational justice club. And the reason why is because, to me, as an educator, that student voice is the most important voice, period. And so we started that group, and this is the second year. You know, last year's a little different because of COVID and online learning, but this is the second year. And what I'm coming across right now, and this is a question for some of the youth. I'm sorry, I know you asked a question for the adults, but I just love that student voice, to be honest with you. I'm really struggling in getting more students involved in that club. And the reason why is because I feel like it's something that has been going on for so long, and that's the culture. So I'm struggling with how to get more students of color. I mean, not even just students of color, but more students in these clubs, because sometimes it's, well, hey, you know, Mr. Watson, that really doesn't impact me that much. You know, you're a person of color. You know, you may not see it now, but it's coming for you. You know, you got to be ready for it. So I'd like to ask the youth, if you don't mind, if I ask them this question, what can I do as an administrator who has already established a club for students of color, or any students who want to focus on racial and educational justice? It's not just a black and white issue. It is, you know, any ethnic group, any gender, any able-bodied, anything whatsoever, just to try to get more students in that space to let them know, hey, you know, we have a wonderful club moderator. I'm involved. The people that are in there love it, but we're still trying to recruit more, because there's more voices out there than just out of a school of 920 students, and we have 15 students involved in this club. So I'm open to any and all techniques that I can utilize for recruitment to this club.
I just put a summary of the question in the chat, so go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say, like, the first, when you mentioned the thing about like culture, that really hit with me, because I was just thinking about that about my own school today. Like, we have like a race and equity team, but there's not like engagement with like certain things, like the survey. We only have like 7 people who filled it out of, you know, the whole school, which is definitely not 7 people. And like in my head, I was like, well, yeah, when the culture of this school is to not care about race and equity, or treat it as an afterthought, or, you know, cover up, you know, whatever it is, just sending out an email and saying, hey, can you fill out the survey, is not going to get like the response that you want. But specifically talking about like recruiting students, and especially as an administrator, that makes me like obviously happy that you're doing that, because I feel like in all the things I do with race and equity, like one of the hindrances is like not having support from administration and people with like more power. And so I would say like I mentioned this earlier, the way that I got involved in stuff was like a specific person, you know, not helping, but like advocating for me, and like, you know, having that connection with me. And so you can't connect with 900 people on the same level, obviously. But I think the 2 things I would say are like using your position as administrator to like promote those values, like these values amongst your staff, and like saying like, this is how these are the standards that like we should have as educators in this school, is, you know, creating community engagement opportunities, making sure that students are being given space to be themselves, all that type of stuff, like making that a priority in your like administrative role. I don't know what you do, but, you know, making that one of the priorities. And then like when you're talking specific with students, that means like getting to know the students like on a like one-on-one basis, whether that's in the halls, whether you go to their classrooms, and like kind of maybe not just saying like, hey, come to this club, but like building kind of the foundations first of like those of going to those classrooms or speaking with those people, and like hearing them on a smaller scale a little bit, like what are the issues that are important to you, or what is your experience in this XYZ, whatever, and like continuing with that, like it's not just one conversation, but like continuing with building those connections. And then I feel like once you have that trust built a little bit, they might be more inclined, depending on how those interactions went, to actually attend the club, and making sure it's like not high risk either, like say like just come one day and try it out, see what it's about, like, and making sure that when you do have those people who, you know, just come to see what it's about, building on those, you know, interactions that you had about like what is important to you, what is your experience with XYZ, and like having those conversations around the things that you're hearing.
Thank you. Yeah, we really try to, I like Tracy's comment, always have food. Boy, we have food, we have plenty of conversations. And I just, you know, the tough part is as a person of color, when you really try to promote something for your people to really help uplift, because at the end of the day, you know, these kids are our future, you know, these young adults are our future. And so I'm not going to say it gets frustrating at times, but sometimes it's like, man, if you only knew what I'm really trying to do for you. You know, I hope you could really see this, but they'll see it when they're ready to see it. You know, I just see a lot of potential, and I just think the worst thing out there is wasted talent. And right now, we have to put as much talent together as we can to make sure that, you know, we're doing something not just for ourselves, but for everyone for the future. So it's, but I'm not disappointed in any sense. It just gives me something. It just gives me more drive. So.
I also wanted to add to the question you asked. I'm older, but like looking back at the clubs that like I was involved in, like activities really, I feel like draw in students. So if you have things, sometimes school is not a safe space. So having activities and asking students like, if you could do anything school sponsored, what would you want to do? And being able to have like maybe a skate deck night. I think it's really important to build a community where the students can actually have collective community with one another. And then afterwards, you can kind of circle around and be like, talk about the real issues, or be able to bond, you know, like a potluck. Food is always important because like that will attract students, free food. But also like retreats, like kind of like if they know that school sponsored, like we can go to a space, not maybe like in the wilderness, you know, and like a camp, you know, a day trip. Or I remember the cool things that my high school did, or I don't know if it was high school or middle school, but there was like a college retreat for students of color. And like there was a bus that transported us there so we could like leave school. And so creating these spaces of community where it's like a joint activity where students can participate. I think that like if you kind of like start asking the students, what would you like to do, like school sponsored, like if you could have fun, you know? And so when you create this atmosphere where it's like, oh, it's my friends, we gotta leave, but then you can have tokens of like those conversations, students will be like, oh my gosh, like I can have fun and I can build community and I can actually feel safe in this space. Like school might not be okay, but like in this space, we can talk, you know?
Mm-hmm. Appreciate the info. Thank you guys.
Alexis. That's your
Yeah,
hand.
sorry. I didn't want to go again if someone else wanted to say anything. But I wanted to add to what I said, because I think I did one of my pet peeves, which is like, basically said like build connections, but didn't say how to build connections. But I think I kind of did too. Anyway, but I wanted to say like also more specific things I forgot, especially like for kind of promotional a bit, is building on like the students that you already have in the club and like their connections to other students. And so something that one of the clubs at my school did was like our, you know, core group, whoever like brought the most amount of like guest people to the next meeting got like something, I don't remember what it was, but you could do something like that. Or I really like what Michelle said. It's kind of going to touch on what I was already going to say. It's like having activities. Like I really like trivia. I don't know if everyone likes trivia, but I feel like you could like, that could be like a warm up, even like not even the whole meeting, of just like trivia about your school, trivia about TikTok trends, trivia about whatever, like just like, because people like competition, or like just do a Kahoot too. Like Kahoots are cool, whatever. And like maybe just, yeah, kind of like incentivizing in a way, but making like attendance fun. I don't know if this is necessarily applicable, but like, you know, when you go to like places and it's like come here 5 times and the 6th time, whatever, like building on not so much, yeah, just making it like more engaging to come, and like then sprinkling in the, you know, important things. I feel like that will really help to continue the attendance.
Thank you.
I have another idea. You can also collaborate with other clubs, like other clubs that are already like established. You can kind of like make this kind of like a focal point. You know what I'm saying? Where like you guys can all come together. Or I know like a lot of students, I don't know, like sometimes students bond through volunteering. So it could be like a volunteering kind of opportunity where they can like go somewhere and do something and help the community. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, we're at the point in our agenda where we are on Q&A for the mentor panel, or if anybody else from the mentor panel wants to talk about critical race theory. The only thing I'll say is I have had at least one school district choose not to work with Washington Ethnic Studies now because we specifically state we are using critical race theory in our professional development. And they are trying to implement an ethnic studies program without critical race theory. And so I think part of this conversation is educating not teachers, but students and families what ethnic studies really is, so that when they, you know, have a student who's in an ethnic studies class that's all about kumbaya, let's all get along, like that's not ethnic studies. And so, you know, really community education about what ethnic studies is, what critical race theory is, and what it's not, right? Because we know it's not what those people out there are saying. So I think that community education is a huge part of this.
Tracy, you're probably not going to share what district that is, are you? Okay, for now, we'll talk later.
Tracy, would you also read Crystal's and Jessica's statement into the record for recording, or invite them to speak? Those are great statements.
Yeah, Jessica says, I've been working with the root of us, Fresnel, and the youth, and what has been coming up for many of us is exhaustion. Students have shared that it can be difficult to be involved in certain events and or circles because there's currently so much happening with COVID-19, and then add the racial trauma and stress of fighting for Black Lives Matter and ethnic studies at schools. That's why the youth have decided for a walkout on Friday. So that's one of the events. Yeah, and we're calling it the intersection of race and COVID, because in an email to Chris Reichdahl about the lack of professional resources on ethnic studies from OSPI, his response was literally, I don't have a lot of time to put towards ethnic studies because of COVID. And so what, you know, our message is because of what Jessica said in the chat, now's the time to double down on ethnic studies and racial justice movements, right? Because students of color, educators of color, families of color are hardest hit by COVID, right? And then Crystal says, I just recently resigned from Lake Washington School District, but did lead the student equity team at East Lake High School. We had recruitment meetings when each established member of the team brought 5 other students, and we just hung out and talked about it. I also had teachers recruit students who exhibited values of our student equity team's mission statement. That was empowering to students as they were being noticed by their teachers for doing the work. Also, we had 3 students per affinity group be represented on the team. As for white students, I recruited the majority of them with the party line of all students need to get free from white supremacy. When I was leading my middle school group, I had cards printed with the name of our group, because we had like a president, vice president, all that stuff, who that was, when we were meeting, in what room. And the students, I was like, you need to go build these relationships with your peers and recruit your peers. It can't be just on me or the adults in the building. Like, this is your work too. And that seemed to be, yeah, that seemed to work. Any other questions? I'll just open it up for anybody, for the youth panel or the mentor panel. Okay, how about this? While you're formulating questions or thinking on that, I will play another video, this one from Teresa, who is she's an intern, but she's also an official member of the Youth Advisory Board. And when we're talking about the difference between youth voice and youth leadership, the Youth Advisory Board for Washington Ethnic Studies now has the same voting rights as our executive board because we're a nonprofit. So they vote on the same things the adult board votes on. They get to decide what they're doing. And my role as executive director of Washington Ethnic Studies now is figuring out the time and the space and the funding. Like, that's all I do. So we're meeting, I think this week, to talk about creating some youth-led professional development that we're going to offer during the summer that's going to be created and led by the Youth Advisory Board of Washington Ethnic Studies. Now they're going to be compensated for it just like any other independent contractor would. So that's exciting. And I love having that youth leadership. They keep me honest. So Teresa is part of the Youth Advisory Board with Alexis.
For me, when I was in school, it was a very selective group of teachers that cared about what students' voices are. You have to find teachers that aren't just like a cool teacher, but usually a lot of the times it is the cool teacher because they're the ones that know that we're more than just vessels that are there to obtain information. We're independent beings that feel, we're independent beings that are being put against the same system that the teachers are getting put against. And so it's important that you find an educator that wants to uplift your voice and wants to uplift the abilities and the thought processes that you have around the world around you. Specifically for me in my high school experience, I think a really big barrier outside of the power dynamic between a student and teacher is that lack of resources, lack of knowing who to go to, lack of knowing what I actually can do with my agency. How far can I push the system to advocate for me and my fellow students that are fighting for equity, that are pushing for it, that want it bad. Because there are a lot of kids that want it bad and just have no idea where to start. I think it's really important that youth and even administration and teachers get connected with organizations outside of your school district or outside of school so that you can platform yourself in an organization that fights for your legislative rights and the legislative policies in education. So organization and groups like WASN, Washington Ethnic Studies Now, places that have board membership for youth like the NCAA Youth Council. These are avenues and opportunities for students to learn more about school legislation and more about how the laws and policies that are getting passed are affecting your day-to-day life and how you have a right to say something about it and you have a right to advocate for what you know is right for you and your students.
Any questions?
I want to put one more thing to answer Dave Watson's question about how to get folks, students involved. The time of day, the space where you meet. Many students Black students in the predominantly white spaces. It's highly, it's racial isolation. It's hyper visibility while being invisible at the same time. And so sensitivity around meeting in a space and then feeling like you're in a fishbowl. And so that keeps people from not wanting to be involved or meet. Also competing clubs and activities where they all have to choose. And we've been taught not to choose ourselves. We've been taught not to see ourselves and as even important. That's why we speak Black Lives Matter. And so for our Black Lives to Matter in schools, we need our spaces to reflect that they do, that we could meet at any space, at any time, anywhere without retaliation, scrutiny, hypervisibility, all the things that are, kids just want to show up and be a part. And so anything that we can do to make that more normal, the standard, to center them and include and really a sense of belonging, not just representation of pictures or books and everything and say, good, we did it. Aren't we done now? To really make the community whole by making where everyone can belong. All my spaces, we center our work and center Black girls, knowing that everyone is welcome there to support that and see that. Nobody's excluding from that, but if I don't specifically advocate and say this space is where Black girls and women and Black boys and men are going to be centered, then there's no place really that they feel safe that they can show up fully as themselves. So having sensitivity around the time, space, that's why I meet away from the school buildings. There's too much trauma even in the buildings to meet there. They don't want to even speak any truth there. So I've got to go off campus to get us back to our core of ourselves, to be okay to even be together. So just have that sensitivity around for everybody. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
That's why I come to my mentorship group. You are.
Okay, you can interrupt me anytime with questions, but I want to bring us back because some folks joined late to, this is our kickoff to a week long of events. So this is our Monday event. Tomorrow is the Root of Our Youth Teach-In. Pernell, you want to talk about that?
Sure, we're going to focus around our mental health. Root of Our Youth wrote a op-ed around mental health, and it's been circulated to the listserv of 5,000 people of the League of Education Voters. It was an essay that they wrote together, and so when they get together and do teach-ins on every other month of the first Saturday of every other month, a youth, college age, and an elder will take the lead and take all of the topics, the demands of Black Lives Matter, and tease those out and have a teach-in about all those topics. And so we've been doing that, but with the umbrella of mental health, because that has been the most ignored and the most prevalent and persistent that we need to have seen and spoken. And so I'm going to play their teach-in again, because they said what they said. And again, the exhaustion level for youth to show up and keep pouring out and saying it again and showing up. I'm trying to honor their mental health by not making them do that, but to show the work that they've already done. They've written about it, they've spoken about it, they've recorded podcasts about it, they've danced it. Like, what else do you want them to do? So show up tomorrow, because they said what they said. So we're going to show it again. And then the youth will be here to reiterate and speak more on how COVID and the more re-traumatizing around going remote again, and not having agency over that and in control of that. So they have a lot to say. So I welcome you to come tomorrow and hear that. So thank you, Tracy.
And then Wednesday, we'll have the State of Ethnic Studies in Washington State, and Washington Ethnic Studies Now will be hosting that. We'll talk about some of the legislation in favor of ethnic studies, in favor of cultural competency. For example, those standards for the state are being rewritten. And then what OSPI is doing and not doing in terms of ethnic studies. We have an ongoing dialogue with OSPI. I'll leave it at that for now. And then Thursday is Young, Gifted, and Black, hosted by the NAACP Youth Council and School Seattle Deserves. So anybody from one of those organizations want to talk about that real quick?
I can. Young Gifted Black has been a talent showcase hosted for the past many years in the Seattle Rainier Beach area, and the name comes from the song from Nina Simone, which it's just really a time to showcase talent from Black youth. There's also a panel talk show that we do every year, where we're going to talk about kind of the same gist that's happening here, like racism and COVID, how those intersect, and social justice in schools and all that type of stuff. You should come.
Thank you, Alexis. And then the 4th, there's a statewide call for a youth walkout. If you go to the Washington Ethnic Studies Now website, there's a flyer for both the Young, Gifted, and Black and the youth walkout at the intersection of race and COVID. And then at 6 p.m., Fernell and I will be here on Zoom for any youth who want to join, adults, family members, educators, whoever wants to join, to hear the youth and their concerns on the intersection of race and COVID. And Fernell will be facilitating some fishbowl conversations around that. So waethnicstudies.com/Black Lives Matter, or BLM, I should say. And that's how you register. It's super easy and free. Any final questions or comments? Well, for the record, then I want to get our final video on here from Tiana answering some of these questions, and then we will say goodbye.
Shout out to Tracy. Maybe shout out to Tracy real quick for helping.
To Fernell. Literally, I texted Fernell and she called me up and we're like, okay, we got it. Here's what we're going to do. We threw everything together over one conversation. So thank you, Fernell.
And always just the most respect and shout out to all our youth in the room for sharing, showing up, being here, doing your thing. You said what you said. Thank you so much.
In my district, I feel like there'd be a lot more validation of Black students and Black experiences, and a lot less of debating if Black Lives Matter or not. That was definitely something that happened when I was in school. And also, I think for non-Black students, it would give an opportunity to really think about what solidarity means and exactly how connected our struggles are, and what it means to support Black communities in a non-performative way. I think one of the biggest barriers to youth leadership is honestly adults, and the power dynamics that come with ageism and adultism. A lot of times there's a misconception about youth in that just because they're younger that they don't have as much knowledge or wisdom, but really their life experiences say all they need for their leadership roles and the things that they do. I think that for adults, I think it's really important that you use the power that you have within the schooling system, give that platform. And so things like Black Lives Matter at School Week, it really helps give that platform to Black students to engage in youth leadership in a way that is led by them. The youth themselves a lot of the time, but there are all types of staff that also support youth that aren't just teachers. We have janitors, people who serve lunches, after school program directors, college readiness coaches,
And oftentimes just even teachers that aren't your own assigned teacher, and also sports coaches. And again, like I think youth are really great at finding that within each other, but you know, it's always great to have adults supporting as well.
I was muted. With that, we'll say good night and thank you everybody for staying with us for the whole 2 hours. We could probably go several more hours into the night. Thank you to all the youth leaders and adult leaders who came out, and we hope to see some of y'all tomorrow for the Root of Our Youth teach-in. So thank you.
Unmute, let me hear your voices. I love to hear the chorus of goodbyes.
Appreciate everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.